Hi, welcome to the Full Cycle Ottawa YouTube channel. My name is Josh. I work over at the St. Laurent location. Today we're going to be going over a lower leg service on a mountain bike suspension fork. All right, so a lot of people don't realize this, but the service interval on their front suspension forks is going to be for every 50 hours of riding time. We're going to do the lower leg service. So today that's what I'll be showing you. So let's dive right in. Today we're going to be working on a Fox 36 factory. The tools and oils and parts kits shown are specific to this fork. Of course, if you're using a different fork, those part kits are going to be different. However, the steps in this video are generally going to be the same for most forks on the market today. So first up, we're going to remove this rebound cover, and then we're going to remove the rebound knobs underneath of this. So we're going to take our 2mm hex wrench, and then we're just going to undo this grub screw. We don't need to go all the way out, just about one turn just to loosen it, and then we'll pull these guys right off. There is a little wave spring right between those. Be careful not to lose that. Set that aside on our mat. And then we're going to go to the 15mm socket. And we're going to come in here and remove this lower leg nut. And set this aside on the bench. We're going to exchange our 15mm socket for our 10mm socket. And then we're going to remove the nut from the air spring side. And then again, set this aside on our bench. All right, so we've hit our first commercial break. I just wanted to take a second to show you guys the inside of my drawers. This is like every time I work on suspension. Like, wow. So back to our regularly scheduled programming. So we were removing the lowers from the fork. So what we're going to grab next is our lower leg removal tools. So what we're going to do is we're going to thread these guys on here approximately halfway. You want to make sure they're on far enough that you're not going to damage the threads when you hit this guy with the mallet. But they got to be backed off the lowers enough that you're actually going to knock this base stud free. So now we're ready to break the base studs free with the mallet. So we're just going to give this a little tap. We don't need to smoke it super hard, just enough of a, just until that guy's loose there. And then we do the same thing for the air spring. All right, so now that the base studs are free from the lowers of the fork, we want to make sure that this guy's tilted upright. With those being free, the oil will drain out from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove these guys here. And then we're going to have our oil pan ready. We've got our little crush washer here that's going to break off in a second. And then we're just going to lower this in one quick motion right over the oil pan. And then give it a little tap right on the crown of the fork, since it doesn't seem to want to let go. You don't want to hit this with a hammer, you don't want to cause damage to the fork, but just a little palm strike is all it takes. And then we'll just glide these guys off. I like to hang them right here. This little air cap gives it a nice little lip, so that'll sit right there, and those will drain while we work on getting some other stuff ready. Now that we've got this guy here dripping off into the oil pan, we're going to get our foam rings ready. So what we'll do is we'll open this guy up and we'll place all our parts on the bench here. I've got my foam rings and everything. So the Fox Seal Kit comes with additional crush washers. So for some forks that may use a Fit 4 cartridge, you would use 2 smaller crush washers. For this one here, it's got a grip 2, so we're going to be using the bigger one, and so we don't actually need this second small one. So we're only using these 2 guys. What we want to do now is grab our measuring cup, which still has some 20 weight gold in it from the last fork I did. We're going to top this up with a little oil. And just before we put these guys in while they're dry, we're going to give them a tiny little bit of a stretch. So we're going to go around and just, you're not trying to rip these up. You don't want to damage the foam rings. Just a small stretch so that once they're seated in the fork, they sometimes have a tendency to get pinched by the upper tubes. So we just want to get these guys stretched out just a smidge. And we'll drop those both in there, and then we can kind of mix this up to make sure that they're totally covered. And then we'll let those guys sit for now and let them really soak up the oil. All right, now these have set for a little bit and they're kind of dripping out. So we're gonna set these guys up on the bench, and then we're gonna grab our wrench, and then we're gonna pry these dust wipers out of here. So you wanna be careful not to gouge the inside of the fork with the end of your wrench. So you're looking for a firm point underneath of that dust wiper, and then you're just gonna pry this down and get that guy there out. And we're gonna throw that off into our little rubbish bin. Next, we're gonna clean out the upper tubes and the lower tubes. So we're just gonna wipe around here where the dust wipers were seated. We're gonna wipe off any residue from those upper bushings. Just give that a good clean. And we'll take a peek in there and see what's going on, make sure everything's in place, make sure your bottom up bumpers are still seated properly. And then we can take some suspension cleaner by RockShox, or isopropyl alcohol. All kinds of different degreasers can be pretty handy. Just make sure that you dry them all out. We're just gonna give this guy here a bit of a spray in there, help break down any of the residual oil that's stuck on the inside. Give that a clean. If you've got an air hose, you can spray some compressed air into there, help dry it out a little quicker. So we'll set these guys aside for now, and then we're gonna clean off our upper tubes. So we'll start by removing our travel O-ring, and we can throw that out. We actually get a brand new one with our parts kit. And then we're gonna give these guys a wipe all the way down. Make sure we clean off our shafts as well as our upper tubes. Okay, so moving on to the assembly of the lowers, we're going to grab our 36 mil seal driver. We're going to get our two seals here. We're going to take off these springs, and then we're going to seat our first one on the seal driver. We're going to get a little piece of shop towel here. We'll get this guy. I like to fold it up in quarters, just so it's nice and thick. And then we're gonna fish out our foam rings. I've got a little hooked pick here that I do this with. You could do it with your finger too, it's fine. And we'll get those foam rings on here. And we're gonna fold this over and just give this a little pat. We're not trying to squeeze it out. We just don't want them like totally soaked in oil. See, they're still very oily. We just removed that, all the excess oil off of those. What we're gonna do here, we're gonna just dip the tip of our finger in some 20 weight gold. We're just gonna give that a little bit of a film around that dust wiper. And then grab our lowers, get a foam ring set up right inside of there. And then we'll bring our seal driver with the seal right onto there. And then we can hammer that in. And then you will repeat those steps for the other side of the lower castings. We're gonna get our seal loaded up with the dust wiper, ready on there. And then we're gonna give that a couple taps to drive it in. Now, as you may have heard over the video, the audio changes. So this seal driver has a bit of a lip. So it actually contacts the edge of the fork to make sure that the seal goes in flush to the edge of the fork. So with this guy here, you can't actually drive the seals further than they're supposed to be. And then what we don't want to forget to do is get these springs back installed. So now that we've got the dust wipers installed in the lowers, we're going to go ahead and grab our SRAM butter, and we're going to apply that to the inside of the dust wipers just to help keep those guys lubricated up. So we'll just get a little globs on both sides there and spread that all the way around. I'm going to try and avoid getting it onto the foam ring as well. Just a nice thick film on the inside of the wipers. With all those steps done, we're almost ready to get the lower legs on. We just want to remember to put our little travel O-ring back up on the fork. Some people call this a phonometer because it lets you know how much fun you're having as you ride your bike. So now for installing the lower legs, we're going to install the air side first. You see this air side stanchion is actually a little bit longer than the damper side stanchion. So then we can work at manipulating this to go in. And the trick here is that you're just going to work on one side. So you kind of angle it a little bit, you press it in there, and you gently get that on. And we're going to push these up very gently and make sure that everything's totally free. Sometimes those foam rings, if they get a little off-centered, they can get pinched between that upper bushing and your stanchion. And if you force it up, you will rip your foam ring and you're going to need to get a new parts kit. So if they get jammed, no fret, you can lower it down and you can try and center them and then go again. But stretching those out in that previous step, that really helps to make sure that they stay centered. So these guys here went on real nice. So all we got to do now is lift this guy up and then we're going to move on to injecting our oil volumes. I've got two different syringes here. The one is going to be for 20 weight gold and the other is for the 5 weight PTFE oil. So on this fork, we're going to be using 10 milliliters of Fox 20 weight gold. And then we're going to be using 40 milliliters of the Fox 5 weight PTFE. Before we go ahead and inject our oils, we want to make sure we're putting them in the right side. It's very easy to locate the air spring side, as that always has the air valve cap where you add pressure to your fork. So on this fork, that's where the 20 weight gold will go. And then on the opposite leg, that's where we're going to be injecting the 5 weight PTFE. So with the fork tilted upright, you can just go in there and you can inject all your oil. Just back this guy up a little bit, make sure we're getting everything in there. And then we're going to grab our 20 weight, put that on the air spring side, and inject that guy there. And you may have noticed while I've been doing this, I've actually got the lowers pulled away from the inner shafts a little bit. So you don't, obviously you can't inject it there. You don't really want to inject it there. You want to kind of pull the fork off of those shafts a little bit, just so that you don't get any splashback from the oil as you inject it. Now that the oil's into the lowers, we're ready to lock everything in place. So we're going to press this guy in until we see these base studs coming out of those holes at the bottom of the lowers. And then we're going to grab our crush washers and nuts. So we got our smaller crush washer for the air spring side, and we're going to take the nut for the air spring side and thread that guy in. I'm just going to leave this finger tight for now. We're going to torque them in a second. We're now going to grab the damper crush washer as well as the nut for the bottom. This guy's a little bit more finicky because it's much larger than the actual base stud for this side. So we're actually going to put it onto this guy here, and that's got a bit of a lip, so that's going to hold it centered. And then what we'll do is just pop that on there. And hopefully that's going to stay underneath of that lip. So it's cooperating for me. If it doesn't for you, you can also use a pick to assist in getting that to stay still. Oh, so mine's actually just falling out, so I'm going to use a little pick here to get that guy in there. And now it's centered again. So we're going to go until it's finger tight. Now we're ready to torque those nuts into place. So we're going to grab our torque wrench and we're going to set this guy to 5.7 Newton meters. And then we're going to grab our 10 and 15 millimeter sockets. So we'll start with our 15 mil and we'll do the damper side here. And then we're just going to get this guy here torqued on. There we go. So it can sometimes feel like you're actually stripping out the bolt, but that's just the base stud actually pressing into the bottom of the lowers. So don't worry about that. If it doesn't tighten up after a long time, it's probably spinning in place. There we go. So with those two torqued in place, now we're going to grab our rebound dials again. You want to make sure that this guy's upright. You can note that based on the lettering. Make sure that's the same. This guy here is directional. So if you didn't keep them together when you set them on your bench, that's how you'll know which way that guy's going to go. So when you press this together, you want to make sure that this nut is in line with this upper flat section there. Depending on the orientation of when you bolted this in, that flat section could be pointing anywhere. You just want to make sure that when you're tightening this on, your bolt is facing that flat section. And with the spring, you want to give this a little bit of a press to kind of compress the spring. That way your dials aren't loose. So we're just going to give this, once it's snug, like barely finger tight, you're just going to give it like a little extra just to keep it on there. And now the final step is going to be this rebound cover. We just want to thread that guy back on. Again, we don't need to make this hero tight. The tighter you put it on, it's just going to be more difficult to remove it. Just snug enough so it doesn't fall off while you're riding. And then maybe get some of your degreaser product, spray it in a shop towel, and give the fork a bit of a wipe down to get all the oily fingerprints off of it. And there you have it. Your fork is ready to hit the trails again. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the video, be sure to leave us a like and subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you next time. Peace out.